14th is your Unit 1 exam. So what I'm going to do today is kind of go over the key concepts from this unit. Take any questions from you, right? Basically lay out the test for you so you know exactly what you need to study over the next, 5 days or whatever, okay? And then give you kind of a review package to work on, okay? It's actually already in the workbook, but I'll post it on Google Classroom as well along with this recording, okay? So let's get to it. First thing we talked about was actually a review of an important concept from Science 10, that important concept being scalars and vectors. So it's important to know what a scalar quantity is and what a vector quantity is. There could be multiple choice questions that are about terminology. Okay? Incidentally, part of the test is multiple choice and part of it is problem solving, okay, or a written response section. So scalars and vectors. I'm probably not gonna, outright ask, is distance a vector quantity? I'm not gonna ask it like that. It's gonna be situational questions, okay, that involve you being able to remember which things we've talked about are scalars and which things we've talked about are vector and what the difference is. So let's list them right now. What quantities have we gone over in this unit that are scalar? Time. What else? Distance. Speed. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay. Which ones are vector? There's like 4. Displacement. Velocity. Acceleration. Okay. Something like that. There's only 3. Oh, these ones that we haven't actually done yet. That's why I figured the list was longer. Okay, because we haven't talked about these yet. We haven't talked about energy and work. That's next unit, but energy and work are also scalar quantities. Okay. In talking about scalars and vectors, we also reviewed the use of v equals d over t and v equals d over t. Okay. Remembering that if it doesn't have an arrow over top of it, it's scalar. So speed is distance over time, velocity is displacement over time, which can also be written like this: final position minus initial position over time. Right? That could be important because sometimes you have to do that using a graph. Okay? And there's going to be some graphing on this exam as well. Okay. Everybody with me so far? Now, I'm not going to waste a 5-mark written response question on v equals d over t. Right, just so you're aware. V equals d over t is tested via graphing and is tested via projectile motion because you use it for both of those things. So expect that, yes, I do need to know how to use and manipulate and solve problems with v equals d over t, but that there's not going to be a Joe went 10 meters south in 5 seconds, solve for his velocity. It's not going to be a 5-mark question like that because that's quite frankly beneath you. Okay? So just know that you could get some questions that involve it but are not focused on it entirely. Okay, next important thing that we went over is also review from Science 10, graphing. Our main focus was position versus time and velocity versus time graphs. You had a lab on each. Okay, so like I said, we did a lab on each one. Okay, we did a lab with the carts that we just pushed, and we recorded their velocities. We did some stuff with their graphs. We calculated velocity from their graphs using the equation of the line. Okay, and we've done a bunch of graphical analysis as well of irregular graphs. Okay, so we know how to do those. Just know that that's something that's going to be on there. Okay, being able to use y equals mx plus b is going to be important because one of the 2 graphs I put on there is going to involve using y equals mx plus b, okay? Having a linear relationship of some kind, okay? Because that happened on both types of graphs that we did in both labs, right? But only one of the questions in the written response on graphing will be on y equals mx plus b. The other will be on just graphing, okay? I'm not going to spoil which one, but okay, know that you have to be able to do that. If the question gives you a graph and it has the equation for the line on it. Should you do that question any other way than to use that line and use that equation? Definitely not. Okay, if I go to the bother of putting the equation of the line on that graph, it means use it. Okay, don't calculate something any other way. Like for example, if it's a position versus time graph, and you've got the equation for the line, and it's like y equals 2.5x plus 1.8. Okay, and the first part is part A, or what is the velocity of the cart? Okay, do you need to do a v equals d over t calculation? Why not? Because the slope of the line is the velocity. That would be a 1 mark question. Okay, spoiler alert. If the question's out of 1 mark, how much work is there? None. The answer is right in front of you somewhere. Okay, so the little tip. Okay, my tests are always set up so that the number of marks is appropriate to the amount of work. Right? If it's a 2 mark question, you probably have a simple calculation and an answer. If it's a 3 mark question, then you've got givens, maybe a manipulation and an answer. Okay? Something like that. But know that the point value for the question is usually indicative of how much work is going to be involved. Okay? If I've already given you a graph and it's a 2 mark question, it's probably 1 simple calculation and an answer. If it's a 1 mark question, the answer's in front of you. Okay? Does that sort of make sense? All right, so using position versus time graphs and velocity versus time graphs. All right, so if we've got, okay, our graphs and it's a position versus time graph, like here on the right, okay, you might get 1.5x plus 3.4. Okay, remember that our initial position then is our y-intercept. Our slope is our velocity, because it's essentially taking the change in position, pf minus pi, okay, divided by time. Would be in seconds on the x-axis. Okay, that would be y minus b over x. Okay, that's why I calculate velocity. Similar for the velocity versus time graph. Okay, if I have a velocity versus time graph, okay, the slope of the line represents acceleration. Okay, and that's because when I do m equals y minus b over x, I'm taking final velocity minus initial velocity and dividing by time. Okay, that's why it calculates acceleration. That might be helpful on your lab. Okay, if I ask you to calculate the displacement, okay, then you got your shapes there. Okay, there might even be a shortcut with a single formula. Okay, something we talked about in class. Okay, back when we were doing acceleration, and I was showing you the formulas. I said this formula calculates the area under the line, and this formula calculates this area and then subtracts this. And, okay, so you might want to review that, because it might help, / will help with the graphing questions. Okay. Third thing we went over is acceleration. There's going to be some problem solving, and there's like one simple calculation in the multiple choice. Like you basically don't have to manipulate, you just have to plug in the numbers. Right? But there's some problem solving to do with the acceleration formulas. Okay? Just an acceleration problem. And then obviously it's also part of projectile motion. So you have to use all of your acceleration formulas, okay, on there. In fact, I think I put 2. We'll go over it. I think I have 2 acceleration problems on the test in addition to the projectile motion problems. Right, so make sure you go over a few from the workbook. Okay, the key is the answers are obviously there, so you can check your work as you go. Right, and then we had vector addition. Right, we spent quite a bit of time on that. There's going to be problem solving to do with that in the written response, and it's exactly what I told you it would be. Okay, one vector that's straight along a compass direction and one that's angled. So that you have to show me you can do vector components and add the x's and y's and get the hypotenuse and do the trigonometry. Okay, so it's nothing you haven't done before. I've seen you do questions harder than the one I put on there with no problem. So practice it a little bit. Okay, know that that's the type of thing I'm going to ask. Okay, so remember they need to be tail to head. Okay, when you draw them, find your x's and y's. And as I said yesterday when I was going over the vector assignment, there is a boat question on the exam. So there's a vector component addition question Okay, and then there's a boat question. So there's kind of 2 vector questions on there. So remember, there's 2 kinds of boat questions. Rowing across, you had 2 of those on your vector assignment. Okay, and going across. There weren't any like that on your vector assignment. Okay. Remember that the big mistake that was made, not everybody made it, but it was the kind of the big one on there, was to use the resultant velocity to calculate how long it took to get across. Remember, we cannot do that. We have to use the velocity that points in the same direction across, okay, straight across, to calculate the time. This is further than this, okay? So they don't go together. All right, questions on the vector stuff? All right, and then we got projectile motion. That's problem solving. There's a couple of multiple choice questions about like the principles of projectile motion, like what quantity do both the horizontal and vertical parts share? How would you calculate the initial vertical velocity? How would you calculate the horizontal component? Okay, stuff like that, like just simple stuff. And then there's 1 of each type in the written. Okay, there's 1 projected horizontally and 1 projected at an angle projectile motion problem, and they are very basic. They are just like the first few examples we did of each. All right, I think. Okay, I want to talk about that. Okay. This probably doesn't make any sense right now, so I'm going to erase it and then make it make sense. The multiple choice part's got one of the zip grade sheets. Okay, probably just about everybody uses those now, okay, to do their multiple choice. Okay, all that happens with those once you've filled them in is I hold my phone over top of it and the camera just matches up with my key. If you have not erased anything completely or filled in more than 1 dot in a line, it's just going to say it's wrong. Okay, so please be mindful of this. Do it in pencil. Okay, in fact, it's not a bad idea to do the whole test in pencil, okay, but especially the multiple choice in pencil, because I have people who do this. They read the question and they're like, oh yeah, it's totally D. And they fill it in nice and dark, which is good. And then they go, oh, I forgot that's negative, so it's not, it's actually B. Fill it in nice and dark. And then like, oh, no, wrong, that was so stupid. It's actually A. And then they go, my phone doesn't know what you're doing. Okay, I'm not looking at your sheet. I'm saving time. Okay, I hold my phone over it and it goes, yoink, there's the mark. I'm like, sweet. Okay, so if you do that, I'm not checking it. Okay, the phone just says it's wrong. I trust the phone. Maybe that's bad, but that's what I do. Okay, so if you do that, it's just going to say it's wrong. Okay, as soon as there's more than 1 dot in the line, it's wrong. Okay, if you don't erase it completely, it may mess it up. Okay, so just make sure. My suggestion is the first time through on the multiple choice, just shade a little tiny bit, because that's easy to erase and it won't recognize it if you do. Okay, when you're going through it later, then you can go, yep, I was right, fill that in, good and dark, okay, and you're good. Okay, but if you change your mind, you only have to erase that little dot and then fill in a dot beside it. Okay, so that would be my suggestion when you're going through that, because we do find that happens sometimes. Okay, but don't do that. That's just wrong. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the test specifically here. So you might want to write some of this stuff down. There are 17 multiple choice questions. There are 7 written response problems. Many of those written response problems have like an A and a B and a C, especially if they're to do with the graphs. Okay? So 17 multiple choice, 7 written, there's 48 marks in the written. So the whole test is out of 65. The formulas are on the front page of the exam. Okay, so you won't be bringing your formula sheet to the exam. Formulas are provided on the test form. Okay. What should you do first? The multiple choice section or the written response section? I would suggest doing the written first. Okay? You can, it's up to you which one you do first, but I always suggest doing the written first, simply because there's more marks there. And you can't, if you got pressed for time, you can't just fill something in for a written response question. You'd be forced to leave a 5-mark problem blank. Okay? As opposed to, oh, I ran out of time and the last 2 multiple choice aren't done, C. And at least you got a chance then, okay? But if you do that with a written response question, it's just blank and you're cooked. Okay? So I would suggest doing the written response first. Do you have to do the test in order? I would also suggest you read over the test first and rank the questions. Okay? Like if you are absolutely certain you know how to do question number 3, do it first. Okay? There's nothing saying you have to start with question number 1. If you feel really good about question 3, do it first. It's always good to start out with something you're confident in because it makes you feel better. And then you approach the rest of the test with more confidence, just simple psychology stuff. Okay? So I would suggest doing that as well. I mean, inherently we get stressed out and we just do things in order because we're human beings, but okay, it's something you can try to do. Right? Try to do it, in an order that makes you feel good about what you're doing. You can always come back to the hard questions at the end. Okay? But what I often see happen to people is they try and do it in order. They have no idea how to do question number 2, and they sit there and stare at question number 2 and accomplish nothing for like 10 minutes, and then they don't finish. Okay? Even though they knew how to do question number 3, they don't even get to it. They allow the question they can't do to stop them from doing the ones they can. Do the ones you can. Okay? If you look at a question and the first 30 seconds, you're not sure how to start, move on. Come back to it. It'll still be there later. But don't let it get in the way of doing the stuff you're sure about. Okay? Simple thing, but people forget it. Okay. Question number 1 in the written response. Horizontally projected projectile. Question number 2 in the written response. Angled projectile. Question number 3, boat. Boat question. Question number 4 is an acceleration problem where vectors are important. And there's a units trick. Question number 5, velocity versus time graph. And it has an A and a B and a C. Question number 6, your vector component addition question. Question number 7 is your position versus time graph. It has A, B, C, D, and E. Okay. None of those problems are like mathematically challenging, so they won't take you very long.
Okay? And then, like I said, in the multiple choice, there's 17 questions. They're mostly checking basic understanding, terminology, okay? Simple calculations, stuff like that. Somebody drives, on McLeod Trail north for 30 kilometers and then turns east and goes 10 kilometers east. What's their overall displacement, or what's their total distance? Like easy stuff like that. Just checking that you understand distance and displacement are different, and I know how to calculate each one. Okay. Simple stuff like that is what you'll find in the multiple choice. Okay. All right. Now, in your digital workbook, on the last page, I believe. Let me make sure I'm right about this. Okay, so starting on page 10 is your Kinematics exam review. So there's a bunch of problems there, okay? There's a few extra ones here. The challenge problems, if you're needing to be humbled, you can try those. I won't ask anything like those on the test, but in case you're getting cocky and you just need to be humbled a little bit, those will humble you a little bit. If they don't, then you have every right to be cocky, okay? But yeah, so know that those are all in there, and I will post the key on Google Classroom here shortly. Okay? But they give you an idea of the kinds of things that are going to be asked in both the multiple choice as well as the written response. Actually, I think the answers for the second part are actually in here, in brackets. Okay, but they're not here for the first one, so I'll post the answer key for the first part on Google Classroom, so you have that, but the other ones, the answers are in brackets at the end. Okay. Now, suggestions for preparation for this test.
Read through your notes a couple of times. You probably don't need to read through it much more than that, because as long as you know the terminology and the basic concepts, you're fine for the multiple choice part. That's generally your notes. Okay. The biggest thing you need to do is practice. Okay. I've just told you what problems I've put in the problem solving part of the test. Practice problems like those at home. You have them in the workbook, you have them on this exam review, okay? Like there's even some like graphing, like simple graphing ones here, okay? Stuff like that. So there's a little bit of everything there, but obviously your digital workbook has got lots of stuff in it too. So you can look at that stuff and know that those are good things to do to prepare for the test, okay? I am not going to spring a question on you that is completely new, okay? I'm testing what I taught you, not what you can synthesize, okay? The synthesis part, that was kind of on the assignment and stuff that we do in class. I'm not going to test that on the test, okay? This is, can you demonstrate to me the skills I taught? Right? So, like I say, I told you what kind of things are on there. That's what you need to practice, okay? I'm not trying to trick you, okay? Sometimes people don't trust it when a teacher tells them exactly what's on the test. I've told you exactly what's on the test. You can trust it, okay? That's the stuff to practice, okay? All right. So yeah, read over your notes, try some practice problems, and don't do it all in one sitting, okay? Like I know people are like, oh, I'm going to spend like 8 hours on Sunday night, studying for my physics test. That's not good studying. Okay? You're not going to remember all the stuff that you go over if you sit for 8 hours straight. You're better to do it in little chunks here and there. Okay, do a problem, takes you 10 minutes, go do something else. Like you can do it during the commercials of a TV show. Okay, just take little bits of time here and there. You're far more likely to commit that to your long-term memory by doing it that way than you are by cramming. Okay. As you're working through that stuff, if there's things that are giving you trouble, then pop in and see me for help. Okay, I've got help today at lunch, today after school, also tomorrow at lunch, and before school, and after school, okay? Friday morning before school, okay, there's help, so you can come in and ask. And even, I mean, you could come in on Monday morning, but that's really starting to cut it pretty close by then. But there's no shame in coming in to ask for help, so do it. I'm here to do that. I have no life, I'm always here. All right, are there questions from you guys? Anything you want me to go over in a little bit more detail? Okay. My plan was to give you the class to work on it, okay, to start going over some things, and if questions came up, then I would be here to answer it. So I'm going to stick with that plan. You've got the review sheet there you can start on. I'll post the key here in a minute, and hopefully some questions come up and we can work through them together, because chances are if you've got that question, so do 6 other people who are too afraid to ask. Okay, so do something for your fellow classmates.